The air in the docking bay smelled of ozone and foreign perfume. Jin wiped his greasy hands on a stained cloth, his fingers tracing a final weld on the atmospheric scrubber's coupling. It was a good weld, clean and strong. It would last another decade, maybe two. Not that it mattered now. The scrubber, like him, like every human on Kalen Prime, was being evicted. Around him, the vast orbital port hummed with sleek, silent efficiency. Kalen ships, their hulls like polished pearl, glided without a sound. His own vessel, the Gongbok, sat in its assigned berth like a scarred, boxy beast among swans. It was a second-hand generation ship, bought with 3 generations of collective human labor. It was all they had. A soft chime echoed, and a holographic notice flickered to life above the main gangway. The graceful angular script of the Kellens scrolled past. Jin didn't need to read it. He knew what it said. He saw the truth in the slumped shoulders of the men and women carrying their few possessions up the ramps, their faces blank with a tiredness that went deeper than bone. Myrae found him there, her data slate clutched to her chest. She was young, her eyes still holding a sharp intelligence that hadn't been completely dulled. "The final decree is being broadcast system-wide," she said, her voice flat. She was their best linguist, their ears to the galaxy. It was a curse. "What's the pretty phrasing this time?" Jin asked, hefting his toolbox. Its weight was a comfort. "Cultural incompatibility," Myrae recited, as if reading a grocery list. "A divergence in developmental synergy. The galactic consensus affirms it. We have no designated homeworld. We are a migratory resource." She stumbled on the last word. "We are to move on." Jin let out a short, hard laugh. A resource. That's all they were. They had come to Kalen Prime 30 years ago, agreeing to settle the southern ash fields, to build the geothermal taps that now powered the Kellen's crystalline cities. They breathed the filtered, thin air. They worked the dangerous, unstable crust. Their children were born in the dim, underground habitats. They built. And now they were incompatible. They got what they needed, Jin said, looking not at Myrae, but at the perfect, shimmering spires of the Kalen habitat ring, visible through the giant viewport. The resource has been extracted. Time to discard the packaging. The walk to the Gongbok's command deck was a march through a silent funeral. Families huddled in corridors, holding on to pots of algae, small mementos from a life that was never really theirs. The air recyclers on the ship already smelled different, stale, human, tinged with the sour scent of despair. Captain Day was on the bridge, a man carved from the same worn stone as his ship. His eyes were fixed on the tactical display, which showed the hundreds of other human vessels, mining skiffs, converted freighters, old colony haulers, being herded into a loose formation by the elegant, dagger-like Kalen enforcer ships. All non-essential personnel are aboard, Day stated to no one in particular. His first officer, a woman named Su-min with tired eyes, nodded. She was their navigator, their finder of paths. Now, her star charts were full of dead ends. The Mokpo is reporting life support failures on their lower deck, Su-min said quietly. The Bison Star has a failing motivator. They can make the jump, but they won't be able to keep up with the fleet for long. Day's jaw tightened. "Tell the Mokpo we will take their excess on board after the jump. The Bison Star. They will have to fall in at the rear. We cannot delay. The enforcers have clear orders to impound any vessel not moving under its own power." Jin took his place at an engineering station, his screens lighting up with a cascade of amber warnings. The Gyeongbok was old, every system patched and repatched. It would hold. It had to. Outside, the last of the umbilical lines detached with soft, final thuds. The Kalen enforcer ships pulsed with a cool blue light. A clear signal. Go. The fleet's engines ignited. a ragged chorus of different propulsion systems compared to the silent glide of the Kellans. The Gyeongbok shuddered, a deep vibration that ran through the deck plates and into Jin's bones. Through the main viewport, Kalen Prime began to recede, its beauty untouched. Indifferent .MIRA, he stood at a cum station, listening to the open galactic bands. The chatter was normal trade negotiations, scientific data streams, cultural broadcasts. It was a universe going about its business. The expulsion of a few 100,000 humans wasn't even a footnote. Then, a new signal cut across the general band. It was the official Kalen farewell. A smooth, androgynous voice filled the bridge. To the human migratory group, your labor is acknowledged. Your departure is logged. The galactic consensus wishes you efficient sourcing of your next suitable environment. Prosperity to Kalen Prime. The message repeated twice and cut off. The silence it left behind was thicker than the metal of the Hull migratory group. Suitable environment. They were being talked about like a flock of birds, or a stain to be washed away. Set the jump coordinates for the Cygnus Reach, Day ordered, his voice hoarse. It's unsettled. There might be asteroids we can parse for supplies. Su-Min input the commands. It's a 3-week journey at our slowest fleet speed, Captain. The Reach is empty. It's all that's left, they replied. The jump drive built up its charge, a whine that climbed through the registers. Jin watched the stars on the viewport stretch into lines. The last thing he saw was the faint, glittering necklace of the Kalan defense grid. A barrier they could never cross again, doubt then. The universe twisted, and they were in the gray. Silent nowhere of faster-than-light travel. The bridge crew let out a collective, weary breath. The immediate pressure was off. They had escaped impoundment, being broken apart for scrap. But now they were adrift in the void, a massive, hungry, dying flock with no destination. Jin left the bridge. His work was never done. He made his way down to the lower engineering decks, where the true heart of the ship thrummed and groaned. Here, surrounded by pipes and conduits, the truth was simpler. A seal either held or it burst. A power coupling either conducted energy or it melted. There was no cultural incompatibility down here. Only physics. He found a leaking coolant line and set to work, the familiar ritual of repair, calming his mind. As he worked, he overheard 2 young maintenance techs talking in hushed, angry tones. My grandfather helped dig the foundations for their star spire, one said. Her voice bitter. They didn't want us looking at their art, or listening to their music, the other replied. We were good enough to lay the stones, but not to walk on the finished floor. Jin finished the weld, but didn't interrupt. The anger was hot, and heat could be useful, but it could also burn you up from the inside. He had seen it happen. He returned to his small bunk later, the ship's artificial night cycle in effect. On a small, personal screen, he scrolled through the fleet's internal network. Lists of supply shortages. Reports of sickness on the Mokpo. A whispered debate from a group of younger people, arguing they should turn pirate, raid a small outpost. The desperation was setting in, taking different shapes. He closed his eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. He thought of Kalen Prime not as it was now, but as it had been when he first arrived, a barren, volcanic rock. He had been proud of the work. He had believed they were building a future. Now he understood. They were just gardeners, brought in to till the soil, so a more compatible species could later plant their flowers. And once the garden was blooming, the gardeners were sent away. The Gyeongbok sailed on, a speck of warmth and misery in the infinite cold. Ahead lay only the uncertain dark of the Cygnus Reach. Behind them, the closed doors of 100 worlds. They were, as the decree said, a migratory resource. And a resource with no use left is called waste. Jin finally drifted into a fitful sleep, the ship's gentle hum his only lullaby. He dreamed not of stars, but of soil, of a world he had never seen, a blue and green marble lost to legend and radio silence. A world called Earth. In the dream, it was always raining, and the ground was always just out of reach. The gray monotony of faster-than-light travel was a special kind of torture. There were no stars to watch, no sense of movement, only the constant, low hum of the ship's systems and the growing weight of silence. The Cygnus Reach, when they dropped out of FTL into its empty heart, was worse. It was a vast, star-poor desert of space. There was nothing to mine, no planets to scan, just cold and dark dot the Gyeongbok hung in the void, the tired queen of a ragged court. Around it, the human fleet drifted, a constellation of sorrow and malfunctioning lights. On the bridge, the mood had sunk from desperation into a grim, quiet dread. Captain Day stared at the main viewer, which showed nothing but black. "Report," he said, the word barely more than an exhale. Su-Min, at the navigation station, didn't look up from her screens. "Scans confirm initial data. The Reach is devoid of usable resources. No mineral-rich asteroids above Class D. No trace gases. It's a vacuum cleaner bag." She finally lifted her head, her eyes shadowed. "Our supplies were calculated for a 2-month search in a resource-moderate zone. This is a tomb." The numbers were on everyone's screen. Food, 37 days at half rations. Water, recyclers were at 89% efficiency and falling. Medical supplies, critical, especially after an outbreak of respiratory flux on the Mokpo. Jin had helped transfer the sickest to the Gyeongbok's overflowing medbay. His engineering skills useless against a virus. Dr. Hwan, a man whose kindness seemed etched into the wrinkles around his eyes, now just looked etched with tiredness. "We need a stable environment," he told Day in a low voice during a staff meeting. "Gravity, real sunlight, or we will start losing people not to disease, but to despair. The immune system cannot fight when the mind has surrendered." The debate Day had feared began to bubble up through the fleet's cones. It started as whispers on the civilian channels, then became open, angry discussions. A faction led by a former security officer named Tae-seok argued loudly for turning back. "We find a small outpost, one of the frontier worlds that isn't part of the big consensus. We take what we need. They see us as pests? Fine, pests survive." Another group, led by a philosopher named Ji-un, spoke of a dignified end. They proposed finding a quiet, barren rock, landing the ships, and shutting down the systems. "We lived as a resource," she broadcast, her voice serene and terrible. "Let us not die as beggars or thieves. Let our last act be our own." Jin heard it all as he moved through the bowels of the ship, fighting a losing battle against entropy. A power coupling here, a leaky pipe there. He spoke little. His world was one of tangible problems. A broken thing could sometimes be fixed. A broken people was beyond his skill. Myray, however, had retreated into her own world of signals and noise. While others argued about the future, she was listening to the past. Her station on the bridge was a cave of flickering holograms and scrolling data. She had tuned their long-range scanners, not just for physical objects, but for the ghostly whispers of the galaxy. She listened to the booming data streams of the core worlds, the trading chants of the mercantile guilds, even the faint, encoded military traffic of the various alliances. It was all the same. Humanity was not mentioned. It was as if, upon leaving Kalen Prime, they had ceased to exist. The silence was more deafening than any eviction notice. Her job, officially, was to find any signal of a habitable world, a stray communication that might hint at a place that would tolerate them. But as days bled into weeks, Her real job became simply to find proof that the universe was still out there, that they weren't already dead and floating in some forgotten afterlife. Captain Day moved among his people, a stone-faced man trying to hold back a flood with his hands. He approved a risky EVA to repair the Bizen Star's motivator, knowing it could cost lives but would keep the fleet together. He cut rations again, despite the protests. He mediated arguments, his voice a steady, unchanging monotone against the rising panic. He was holding the ship together, but Jin could see the fractures in the man's own eyes. One evening, during the artificial night cycle, Jin found Mireille still at her station. The bridge was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of status lights. On her main screen was a visual of static, the ambient noise of the universe. "You should sleep," Jin said, placing a cup of reconstituted tea next to her. "I am sleeping less than the water recyclers," she replied, but offered a faint smile. "I am listening for a miracle, Jin, a very specific, very quiet miracle." "And what does a miracle sound like?" he asked, leaning against the console. "Like a mistake," she said softly. "Like a signal that shouldn't be there. All the clean, proper traffic of the galaxy. It's like a wall. I'm looking for a crack in the wall." She played a snippet of sound for him. It was a fragment of a Kalen news broadcast, talking about a new art installation. The voices were beautiful and cold. She played another, a Trelgian trade offer for deuterium. It was harsh and guttural. "This is the wall," she said. Then she opened another file. It was mostly static, a hiss of empty space. But buried deep within it was a faint, rhythmic pulse. "This," she whispered, "is from a dead survey probe launched by my great-grandmother's generation. It's been dead for 80 years, but its beacon still pulses. A ghost, that's what we are now. Ghosts sending out pulses nobody hears." Jin didn't know what to say. He was a man of metal and plasma, not of ghosts and miracles. He left her to her listening. 2 days later, the first ship broke. It was a small transport, the Jeju Dawn. Its captain, a man pushed past his limit, sent a final, short message to the Gyeongbok. "We cannot live in the gray. We will seek the black." Before anyone could respond, the Jeju Dawn powered up its engines to full, pointed its nose away from the fleet, and jumped into FTL without coordinates. It vanished, a suicide leap into the absolute unknown. The event sent a shockwave of despair through the remaining ships. The arguments grew louder, more frantic. T-Seok's faction was gaining voices. It was in this atmosphere, thick with grief and a looming, violent decision, that Mireille's console emitted a soft, persistent chime. Not an alarm. A detection alert. She straightened up, her fatigue sloughing away. It was a signal. Faint, buried in the cosmic background radiation, coming from a sector so obscure it wasn't on any of their charts. The computer flagged it because it was structured, not natural. It was a repeating pulse. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She cleaned up the signal, filtering out the noise. It was old. It used a modulation technique centuries out of date. Galactic Pulse Code, Base 4. It was the universal standard from 300 years ago. With trembling fingers, she initiated a decode. The computer struggled. The signal was weak, corrupted by its long journey across the interstellar deep. A word began to form on her screen. A single word, repeating. It was in no language she knew instantly. But the root structure, her breath caught. It was phonetically simple, primitive even. She routed it to the main linguistic database, requesting a match against all known human and pre-diaspora archives. The search wheel spun. Captain Day, feeling the change in her posture, walked over. "What is it, Mireille?" "I don't know, Captain," she whispered. "A signal. From nowhere. The search wheel stopped. A match flashed with a 99.7% probability. The word was identified, not it was English. A pre-diaspora Terran language. The word on the screen, clean and impossible, was hello. The bridge of the Gyeongbok was frozen. The usual background hum of systems, the soft beeps from various stations, all of it seemed to have been sucked out into the void. The only sound was the faint, ghostly whisper of the signal playing from Array's console. Hello, 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 Captain. Day broke the silence first. His voice was low, careful, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the impossible word. Confirm the origin, Su-min, now. Su-min's fingers flew across her navigation panel. Her earlier exhaustion burned away by a shot of pure adrenaline. She cross-referenced the signal's directional data with the ancient, half-corrupted star charts in the database. The plot took shape on the main viewer. A line extended from their position in the Cygnus Reach, back through the spiral arm, past the markers of known space, into a sector so old and dusty it was usually labeled pre-consensus unmapped. The line ended at a single yellow star. A number code flashed beside it. Soul. A collective inhale swept the bridge. That's a mistake, Dr. Juan said, stepping forward. His medical mind sought rational causes. It's an echo. A bounce from an old probe. It has to be. Earth has been radio silent for over 2 centuries. The stellar flares, the geomagnetic collapse. The consensus survey declared it a Class 12 dead world, uninhabitable for 10,000 years. The signal isn't bouncing, Myray said, her voice trembling with a force that wasn't fear. It was focus. It's coherent. It's being broadcast. And it's not just hello. She had been working while they talked. The initial pulse was a carrier wave. Beneath it, she found layers of data, compressed and varied. It's a package. A huge one. It's transmitting in multiple languages. I'm seeing Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic root code, and Galactic Pulse Code Base 9. Base 9 was the modern standard. Put the GPC layer on speaker. Day ordered. Myray isolated the stream. A calm, neutral voice, synthetic yet somehow warm, filled the bridge. Anomalous stellar activity has passed. Long-term cycles have completed. Terraforming protocols are final. Biosphere stability is confirmed. Atmospheric, hydrologic, and geological readings are within optimal human habitable parameters. Coordinates attached. Return is advised. There was a pause, and then the voice added a single staggering phrase. Return home. The words return home hung in the air, solid and heavy as planets. No one moved. Jin, who had come to the bridge after hearing the commotion, stood by the door, his greasy cloth forgotten in his hand. Home. It was a fairy tale. A sad story told to children. A place of poisoned skies and burning seas. Not a place that sent invitations. It's a trap, a voice growled from the Kun station. It was Tae Seok, the proponent of turning pirate. He had been listening on an open channel from his own ship. Think, who benefits? The consensus finds us annoying. They know we're desperate. They broadcast from a dead system we're sentimental about. We rush in, and a Kalan fleet is waiting to dismantle us for scrap once and for all. His words were like cold water. The hope on the bridge flickered, replaced by suspicion. It made a terrible kind of sense. Scan the origin point. Day commanded, his own hope ruthlessly suppressed by decades of command. Full active scan. Look for energy signatures, fleet signatures, anything that isn't a dead rock. Su-min launched a full battery of long-range scanners. The active pulses would reveal their position to anyone listening, but stealth no longer mattered. Minutes ticked by. The main viewer switched to a composite image of the Sol system. Built from the scanned data dot, it showed a healthy yellow star. 3 rocky planets in the green band. The third one was a vibrant, swirling blue and green marble. White clouds. No signs of atmospheric scarring. No radioactive hotspots. And orbiting it were structures clean, geometric, and silent. No engine heat. No weapon signatures. They were platforms, not warships. Readings matched the broadcast. Su Min reported, disbelief coloring her professional tone. Nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere. Liquid water oceans. Continental landmasses. With vegetation. The orbital structures are inert. No power readings except for a low-level broadcast from the source of our signal. No fleet, Jin said quietly, his engineer's mind analyzing the simple, elegant design of the orbitals. No hiding places. It's empty. Or it looks empty. Tae Siak's voice countered over the speaker. It's too perfect. A healed Earth? After 200 years? It's a painted backdrop. A lure. A fierce debate erupted across the fleet's open channel. Voices overlapped fear, yearning, rage, exhausted hope. The divide was instant and brutal. Some cried to go, to believe the miracle. Others, hardened by a lifetime of rejection, saw only the final, cruelest trick. Captain Day let the noise wash over him, his eyes fixed on the blue-green world on the screen. He thought of his duty, of the sick on the Mokpo, of the Jeju Dawn that had chosen the void. He thought of leading his people to a peaceful end on a barren rock, as Ji-yoon had suggested. Then he thought of the word, home. He switched to the fleet-wide channel. The arguing voices cut off as his identifier flashed. This is Captain Day of the Gyeongbok, he said, his voice tired but final. We have a set of coordinates. We have a message. We also have 23 days of air and food left. We can debate the truth of this signal until our last breath, or we can go and see for ourselves. He let that sink in. The silence on the channel was absolute. The voyage to the Sol system will take most of our remaining reserves. There will be no margin for error. No second chance. Those who wish to follow, fall into formation behind us. Those who do not, you are free to choose your own path. We jump in 1 hour. He closed the channel. The bridge crew looked at him. The weight of the decision was on his shoulders alone. He had just possibly committed them all to death. Myrae was looking at the linguistic data. Captain, she said. The phrasing in the older languages. It's not a command. It's not return home as an order. In the Old English, it's closer to. Coming back home is a good idea. It's advice. From someone. Or something. That waited. An hour later, the fleet made its choice. Nearly 80% of the ships, including the crippled Mokpo and the struggling Bizen Star, aligned their drives with the Gyeongbok. The others, led by Tae Siak's ship, hung back, a silent, dark cluster against the stars. They would take their chances in the reach. Jin returned to engineering to oversee the jump prep. As he ran the final checks on the overtaxed FTL drive, he wasn't thinking of traps or miracles. He was thinking of systems. The signal was a system. The orbital platforms were a system. They were either functional or they were not. This was not about hope. It was about diagnostics. For the first time in a long time, he had a concrete problem to solve. Could this ship make it that far? His hands moved with certainty. The drive would hold. He would make sure of it. On the bridge, Day gave the order. The coordinates were set for Seoul. The dying fleet powered up its engines. The jump drives whined, a chorus of strained machinery as the stars began to stretch. Jin looked at a small personal screen on his console. He had called up the only image they had of old Earth. a blotchy, stone-racked ball of gray and brown. Then he looked at the clean, serene image from their new scans. They were not the same. One was a corpse. The other was a question. The Gyeongbok lurched, and the gray of FTL enveloped them. They were not chasing a memory. They were chasing a ghost that had just said hello. They were going to see if a home could be resurrected, or if, in the end, they would simply die looking at a very beautiful lie. The gray of the jump gave way to the sharp, clean black of real space. The bridge crew of the Gyeongbok braced themselves, hands hovering over controls, eyes wide with a fear that was now mixed with a desperate, fragile hope. They expected anything: the blinding glare of Kalen energy weapons, the sterile emptiness of a holographic projection, or the grim, scarred reality of a dead world. What they saw stole the breath from their lungs. The sun soul was a steady, warm yellow, not the angry red of their history books. And there, hanging in space against the velvet black, was Earth. It was not the Earth of legend. There were no churning, permanent storm clouds, no continents stained brown with radiation or black with fire scars. This was a world of breathtaking, impossible beauty. Deep, vibrant blue oceans swirled under feathery white clouds. Lush green landmasses, sharp and defined, showed textures of forest and plain. The polar ice caps glittered, clean and white. The air, according to Sumin's immediate scans, was a perfect nitrogen-oxygen mix. The water signatures were pure. It's alive, Sumin whispered, her voice cracking. The data on her screen was a symphony of green indicators, a song of habitability they had never seen outside of heavily terraformed core worlds. Jin stared, his engineer's mind scrambling for a fault. A trick of light. A sensor ghost. But the image was clear, and the other ships in their ragged fleet were sending the same awestruck, confused data. The Motpo was broadcasting a shaky video feed from a sickbay viewport, showing children pressing their hands to the glass, their faces illuminated by the blue-green glow. Orbiting this renewed Earth were structures. They were smooth and elegant, made of a material that seemed to be pale stone and silver metal fused together. They were not bristling with weapons or communication arrays. They looked like ancient, serene temples set adrift in space. One of them, the largest, pulsed with a soft, guiding light. A signal washed over them, not on the old pulse code, but on a standard docking frequency. The same calm, synthetic voice from the broadcast spoke. "Welcome to Sol System. Designated human fleet. You are cleared for approach. Guidance beams are active. Please follow to assigned landing coordinates. Atmospheric entry protocols are available. Your vessels are compatible." Captain Day found his voice. "Who is this? Identify yourself." There was a brief pause. "I am the steward. This system is under my care. Your arrival was anticipated. Please follow the guidance." There was no threat, no demand, just a simple, calm instruction. It was utterly disarming. Tae Siok's voice, harsh with static, broke from the small cluster of ships that had followed them, his earlier bravado now edged with panic. "Don't. It's a gravity trap. It's pulling us in." But the Gyeongbok's sensors showed no tractor beams, no unnatural gravitational pull. Only the gentle, natural tug of the planet below. They made a decision. We follow the beam. All ships maintain formation. Prepare for atmospheric entry. Jin, I want you on the shuttle. You and the team are going down first. Jin simply nodded. If this was a trap, he would see its mechanisms. If it was real, he would see its foundations. He gathered a small team. Myray to communicate, Dr. Huan to assess the biological environment, and 2 of his best junior engineers. The shuttle detached from the belly of the Gongbok, a speck of battered metal falling toward the jewel below. The ride through the atmosphere was smoother than any Jin had ever experienced. No turbulence. The heat shield glowed a normal, healthy orange. The guidance beam led them down, not to a landing pad on one of the orbital platforms, but through the clear, sweet-smelling air toward a continent below. They broke through the cloud layer. My ray-gasped dot below them was a coastline of stunning clarity. White sand beaches met water of a blue so profound it seemed to glow. Inland, rolling hills covered in dense, green forests stretched to snow-capped mountains. And there, nestled between a river and the forest edge, was a city. But it was empty. The structures were beautiful, and strange a blend of organic curves and clean geometry, built from the same pale stone and metal as the orbitals. Wide streets, parks bursting with unfamiliar flowers, serene plazas with fountains of clear water. There were no vehicles, no movement in the windows, no signs of life except for the plants and the birds they could see wheeling in the sky. The shuttle settled softly on a wide, open plaza. The hum of the engines died, leaving an eerie, profound silence broken only by the whisper of wind and the distant cry of a bird. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Juan opened the external sensors. Air is clean. Better than clean. No pollutants. No unfamiliar microbes. It's like the air has been filtered for 1,000 years. Jin triggered the ramp. It opened with a hiss. The smell that washed in was the realest thing he had ever experienced. It was damp soil, blooming flowers, clean water, and a crisp, green scent he had no name for. It was nothing like the recycled, metallic tong of ship air or the dusty, processed smell of colony habitats. He was the first to step out. His boots touched not metal grating or synthetic grass, but actual stone, warmed by a real sun. The gravity was a gentle, familiar pull. He looked up. The sky was a dome of perfect blue. The sun was warm on his skin. He hadn't felt direct, unfiltered sunlight since he was a child on Kalen Prime. Myrae stepped down beside him, tears streaming silently down her face. She wasn't crying from sadness, but from the overwhelming sensory shock of it. This was not a dead world. It was a world sleeping. Waiting. Juan took out a medical scanner and pointed it at a nearby flowering vine. The biochemistry is compatible. More than compatible. It's ancestral. These plants, they share a genetic lineage with the Terran samples in our seed banks. He knelt and scooped up a handful of dark, rich soil. It teemed with tiny worms and insects. The ecosystem is complete. It's mature. This didn't happen in 200 years. This is millennia of stability. Jin walked to the edge of the plaza, where clear water flowed in a channel. He reached down and touched it. It was cold and clean. He looked at his reflection, seeing the deep lines of worry and hard labor, and behind him, the impossible serenity of the empty city. A soft chime came from the shuttle's comb. It was the steward's voice, now coming from a simple speaker set into a nearby stone archway. The environment is safe. The city is prepared. Resources are available. The landing zones across other continents are also ready. Your people may disembark. Where are you? Jin asked, looking around at the silent, beautiful architecture. I am the system, the voice replied gently. I am in the orbital platforms, in the environmental processors, in the memory of the stones. I was built by your ancestors to mend what was broken and to wait. I have waited. You are home. Back on the Gongbok, Captain Day watched the shuttle's video feed. He saw Jin touch the water. He saw Juan hold the soil. He saw Marae's face turn to the sun. He saw no traps, no hidden armies. He saw only a world that had healed itself in secret, keeping a light on in the window for its lost children. He opened the fleet-wide channel. His voice, for the first time in years, was not heavy with dread, but quiet with a wonder he had forgotten he could feel. "All ships," he said, the words simple and true. "Land, we're home." The silent city came alive with the sounds of a people returning from the dead. Ships, looking suddenly small and shabby against the graceful architecture, settled in parks and on wide boulevards. Ramps lowered, and humanity stepped out, tentatively, into the sun. There were no cheers at first, only a profound, trembling silence. People knelt, then touched the grass. They cupped their hands in the streams and drank. Parents held their children close, pointing at birds with unfamiliar, colorful plumage. The air was filled with the sound of quiet weeping, not of grief, but of a pressure release, the slow letting go of a weight carried for generations. Jin worked. While others marveled, his hands itched for purpose. He led teams to investigate the city's infrastructure. They found power, clean and limitless, drawn from the planet's core and beamed from the orbitals. They found water purification systems so advanced they were invisible. They found homes, not barracks, not habitats, but real homes with simple, comfortable furniture and climate that adjusted to the occupants. The steward guided them via gentle voice from the walls, explaining how to request food from synthesis terminals that produced nutritionally perfect, familiar meals. "The systems are yours," the steward said. "My purpose was to restore and to wait. The waiting is over." Captain Day, no longer a captain of a starving fleet, but something new, walked the city's edge where the forest began. Dr. Juan joined him, carrying a scanner that now showed only benign, beautiful data. "It's not just that it's habitable," Juan said, his voice full of awe. "It's designed for us. The pollen isn't allergenic. The microorganisms are symbiotic. The day-night cycle matches our ancient circadian rhythms. It's a cradle. But who built the steward?" Day asked, looking up at the sky where the orbital platforms hung like distant moons. "We did," Juan said simply. "Or our ancestors did." The steward's knowledge base has schematics, logs. They knew the solar flares weren't the end. They were a cycle, a terrible cleansing cycle. They built an AI of immense patience and gave it one directive: mend the world and keep the light on. They knew we would scatter. They hoped some of us would look back. In a plaza now filled with people eating real fruit from the trees, Mireille found a terminal. She asked the steward a question that had been burning in her. "Why did you wait until now to call?" "We have been suffering for a long time." The steward's voice was calm. The call was always active. It was a whisper in the noise of the galaxy. Your instruments, built by others for other purposes, were not tuned to hear it. You found it only when you stopped looking for a door others had built and started listening for a whisper from home. And you were ready to hear it only when you had nowhere else to go. Meanwhile, Jin discovered a different kind of workshop. It was a large, airy building filled with raw materials, metals, polymers, ceramics, and fabrication terminals that responded to thought and gesture. He sketched a simple design for a more efficient water filter for the farmlands he could already imagine cultivating. The terminal understood, refined his design with elegant simplicity, and produced it. It was technology that felt like an extension of his own mind, not a tool granted by a superior. For the first time, he wasn't fixing someone else's broken machine. He was creating something new for his own people, on his own world. Weeks passed. The shock wore off, replaced by a busy, gentle industry. People chose homes. Gardens were planted with seeds from the fleet's archives, which sprouted with impossible vigor in the rich soil. Children's laughter became a common sound, echoing off the stone. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple, a real sunset. Not a simulation. The senior members of the fleet gathered. We need to decide what to do, they said to the group, which included Jin, Mai, Huan, and Su Min. The galaxy thinks we are dead or dying. What do we tell them? Mai, who had been studying the steward's communication protocols, spoke up. The steward has a system-wide transmitter, powerful enough to be heard in the core worlds. We can send whatever we want. The debate was short. There was no desire for revenge, no wish to declare war or demand apologies. The pain of their exile was still there, but it was being slowly covered by new layers of peace, like soil over an old scar. We tell them the truth, Jin said, his voice rough. We tell them we are not a resource. We have a home. And then we lock the door. A small smile touched Day's lips. He nodded to Mai. Do it. In a quiet chamber at the top of a spire, Mai prepared the message. She used simple, clear galactic code. She thought of all the decrees, the evictions, the cold pronouncements. She began to type. The message was broadcast the next day. It went out on all major frequencies, a clear, strong signal from a sector long silent. Message to the galactic consensus, to the Kalan primacy, to the mercantile guilds, and to all who listen. This is humanity. We have received your many rejections. We have heard your verdict that we are homeless. We are writing to correct your records. We are not homeless. We have returned to Earth. It is not dead. It is alive, and it is ours. Our door is closed to those who would exploit or pity. Our door is open to the lost, the rejected, and the kind who seek a place to belong. Do not send diplomats. Do not send traitors. Send your weary, if they wish to come. To all others, our business is our own. You may continue your consensus without us. The message ended not with a formal seal, but with a simple, unedited sound recording, the wind rustling through the new leaves of an oak tree, and the distant, joyful shout of a child. The galaxy would react. There would be shock, disbelief, perhaps even fear or greed. But that was a problem for another day, if it was a problem at all. That night, Jin walked outside the city limits, into the true darkness of the unpolluted night. A million stars he had only ever seen from a viewport blazed overhead, no longer points of cold navigation, but a ceiling of breathtaking beauty. The air was cool. Insects chirped. He could hear the river dot. He sat on the grass and let the reality of it sink in. He was on a planet. He would wake up to this same ground tomorrow. His work would no longer be about survival, but about building. He thought of the ships in the city, already being taken apart, their metals being recycled into tools and art. They were not a fleet anymore. They were a memory. From the city, he could see the soft glow of hearth lights, real fires in some homes, gentle bioluminescence in others. The sound of someone playing a flute, tentative and sweet, drifted on the breeze. He was not a migrant. He was not a resource. He was not a ghost. He was home. And for the first time since he could remember, the silence around him was not the silence of the void, but the deep, peaceful quiet of a world at rest, holding its children safe in its arms. The long exile was over. The story of wandering was closed. A new story, their own story, had just written its first gentle word.